Welcome to Idlewild Cottage, a quiet place where kindred spirits can linger together over a cup of tea, savoring all things lovely and cozy. My name is Juliana, and I'm delighted to have you. Each episode here at the cottage will center around a theme. That theme will be celebrated in a number of ways through literature, art, nature, and even some favorite movie scenes. We'll cherish the sweet and simple things of life. So make yourself at home, and I'll put the kettle on. If you were with us last week, you'll recall the snowy frolics we enjoyed by way of sleds and sleighs. This week, the winter fun continues with ice skating. Oh my goodness, friends, I had a hard time narrowing down the many literary and cinematic references to this charming pastime. It's such a beautiful sport that it's no wonder our many heroes and heroines take to the ice whenever the temperatures drop. Though the temperature has dropped, all is warm and cozy for the Winfield family in our first movie of the week, By the Light of the Silvery Moon. George and Alice Winfield are celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary, and their family helps reenact the scene of their engagement, which took place at Miller's skating pond. They all arrive by way of horse drawn sleigh, help each other lace up boots, and join the other members of the town in merrily circling the pond. Of course, there are mishaps along the way. George bears the brunt of Crack the Whip. The family servant Stella, the inimitable Mary Wicks, can never seem to find a skating partner. And daughter Marjorie, that's Doris Day, believes her fiancé Bill, Gordon McRae, no longer cares for her. It doesn't take long for the wrongs to right themselves, and soon Bill and Marjorie's arms are linked as they glide across the ice singing By the Light of the Silvery Moon. Ice skating is much less romantic for poor Betsy Ray of Deep Valley. Maud Hart Lovelace confides, Betsy had weak ankles. She was a miserable skater. But since she had started going with a crowd, she always pretended radiantly to like whatever the others liked, and the others adored skating. Even so, we find a certain charm in seeing the crowd preparing for a visit to the pond. Betsy put on the red stocking cap, leaving a few curls outside to frame her face. She wore red mittens, too. She tucked her red muffler at its most becoming angle, picked up her skates, and swung them before Herbert and Tony with a playful, "Who wants the great and supreme honor?" Herbert is quick to accept and offers to carry Betsy's skates to the pond. While Betsy pretends to enjoy skating, another Deep Valley girl genuinely enjoys it. Emily of Deep Valley, written by Lovelace in 1950, shifts our attention from Betsy and the crowd and instead centers around the much quieter life of Emily Webster. It is on the ice that Emily feels alive, and a bit romantic too. Here are a couple of excerpts from this lovely book. Monday afternoon, she took her skates and went over to the pond. The pond was so shallow that it froze quickly, and it was already covered with boys. They had built a fire. Orange flames were leaping. It was good to be on the ice again, she thought, sailing down the pond with her hands in her muff. We later pick up with Emily and her sweetheart. She and Jed went skating often. Sometimes he appeared after school, his skates over his shoulders. She would hurry for her skates, her jacket and fur hat and muff. Arms crossed and hands clasped, they would glide down the pond, smiling at the stars, drinking in the icy air while the snow put on its twilight gown of blue. Romance also drives the hearts of this next group of friends, though their skating experiences are far from graceful. The Pickwick Club takes to the ice in the Charles Dickens classic, The Pickwick Papers. "What say you to an hour on the ice?" proposed Wardle. "You skate, of course, Winkle," said Wardle. "Yes, yes," replied Mr. Winkle. I am rather out of practice." "Oh, do skate, Mr. Winkle," said Arabella. "I like to see it so much." "Oh, it's so graceful," said another young lady. A third young lady said it was elegant, and a fourth expressed her opinion that it was swan-like. This is all the encouragement Mr. Winkle needs. Before long, he is attempting to fasten his skates with the points behind and getting the straps into a very complicated and entangled state with the assistance of Mr. Snodgrass. At length, Mr. Winkle is raised to his feet. With Sam Weller now at his side, Mr. Winkle staggers and clings, begging, "Not too fast, Sam, not too fast." Stooping forward with his body half doubled up, being assisted over the ice by Mr. Weller, Mr. Winkle proceeds in a very singular and unswan like manner. So far, we've seen skating as a playful activity. For some, however, it's a way of life. In her beautiful 1865 book, Hans Brinker or the Silver Skates, Mary Mapes Dodge skillfully weaves history and geography throughout the narrative of the Dutch children who live along the banks of a frozen canal. Let's peek in on a typical school day. It was recess hour. At the first stroke of the schoolhouse bell, the canal seemed to give a tremendous shout and grow suddenly alive with boys and girls. The sly thing, shining so quietly under the noonday sun, was a kaleidoscope at heart, and only needed a shake from that great clapper to start it into dazzling changes. Dozens of gaily clad children were skating in and out among each other, and all their pent up merriment of the morning was relieving itself in song and shout and laughter. Hans Brinker leads us to this week's painting. N.C. Wyeth provided the front cover illustration for the 1932 edition of this book. This cozy piece, with its warm jewel tones, features the children in traditional Dutch costume gliding cross-armed up the canal. I have a copy of this lovely edition, so I'll capture an image to share with you on Instagram in the coming days. School children also provide inspiration for the success of the Avonlea hockey team in the delightful show Road to Avonlea. In the Season 2 episode Misfits and Miracles, the Avonlea Avengers challenge the so-called Misfits to a hockey game. The Misfits are those not good enough to be Avengers, but they're of course the town players we really want to cheer for, like Jasper Dale and Peg Bowen. Oh, and their coach? A last-minute emergency calls upon none other than Miss Muriel Stacy, whom you will no doubt remember from Anne of Green Gables. Jasper's bumbling ways somehow lead to timely blocks at the net, and Peg Bowen surprises us all with unexpected skill and speed. In the end, the awkward, lovable misfits have their moment of glory. English poet William Wordsworth knew the glories of ice skating too. He wove the beauty of his experiences in his 1850 poem, The Prelude, recalling the vivid sensations he knew as a child. We see Wordsworth choosing not the warmth of home, but the raptures of skating at the day's end in this excerpt. And in the frosty season, when the sun was set and visible for many a mile, the cottage windows through the twilight blazed. I heeded not the summons. Happy time it was indeed for all of us. To me, it was a time of rapture. Clear and loud, the village clock told 6. I wheeled about, proud and exulting like an untired horse that cares not for its home. All shod with steel, we hissed along the polished ice. Though skaters are traditionally shod with steel, as Wordsworth says, blades aren't always necessary, especially if you are a 12-year-old girl living on the shores of Silver Lake. We can just feel fidgety Laura longing to get her wiggles out. The weather grew colder. Silver Lake was frozen. Laura would walk from window to window, looking into a whirl of snowflakes and listening to the wind. When the sun shone, no matter how cold it was, Laura must go out. When Ma would let them, she and Carrie, well wrapped in coats and hoods, with shoes and mittens and mufflers on, went sliding on Silver Lake. Holding hands, they ran a little way and then slid on the dark, smooth ice. First on one foot, then on the other, with little runs between slides, they went back and forth, breathless and warm and laughing. Siblings do make grand skating companions, as we see in Elizabeth Enright's 1942 book, The Four-Story Mistake. The Melody children, Mona, Rush, Randy, and Oliver, discover the charm of country living, which includes winter skating. The brook froze over solid. Even the little cascade was covered with a deep, ruffly collar of ice. After school each day, they tried out their ice skates. They could hardly wait to get back in the afternoons, flinging their books down on the hall table, searching for their skates, not even removing their mittens as they snatched a quick cookie from the jar in the pantry. For the next hour or two, until it was really dark, their part of the valley was filled with the sound of voices, bumps, outcries, and the peculiar ringing strokes of blades on ice. For our next cinematic moment, let's take a look at the 1999 movie What Katie Did. Based on the 1872 book by Susan Coolidge, we see how Katie's haphazard, topsy-turvy ways are gently influenced by her adored older cousin, Helen. In this adaptation, Helen is played by Megan Follows when she was in her early 30s, so it's a delight to see our favorite Anne Shirley in this touching story. Both Katie and Helen share a love of ice skating. Helen has been ill for quite some time and longs for those days. Under her gentle mentorship and example, Katie overcomes her own burdens and selfish ways. By the end of the film, we see Katie's gratitude, grace, and growth expressed in a simple, solitary skate over the vast, frozen lake. While Katie's change in countenance is somewhat miraculous, Cary Grant's is absolutely angelic in the 1947 film The Bishop's Wife. Bishop Henry Brougham, played by David Niven, is distracted by plans to build a cathedral. He becomes so wrapped up in the pursuit that family joy has been sapped from his home. His wife Julia, played by Loretta Young, and daughter Debbie, you may recognize her as Zuzu from It's a Wonderful Life, keenly feel this shift in family life. In answer to the bishop's prayers, Dudley enters the scene. Cary Grant is the ever-smiling angelic visitor charged with guiding the bishop's family back into the love and joy they once shared. One of the most memorable scenes in which this takes place is on the ice. Dudley sees that Julia longs for a spin, so he expertly guides her and their cab driver to the lively pond scene. The orchestra plays waltz after waltz while Dudley and Julia skate with miraculous grace. Even Sylvester the cab driver seizes the opportunity when Dudley cheerfully calls out, "Put on some skates and find out how young you are." Well, friends, I hope you have felt young and merry throughout this episode, too. I'd like to continue the joy and merriment theme in our closing psalm, and how well the river and mountain references in Psalms 98 and 100 call to mind today's lively settings. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy before the Lord. Shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Kindred spirits, would you too find joy as you go from this place, knowing that the God of creation, of every frozen pond, lake, brook, and mountain river, looks upon you with delight. Thank you for joining me today, dear ones. Please come again soon to Idlewild Cottage.